Landlords, you want to submit your late payment tenants to the credit bureaus? Renewals are coming fast and furious. What questions should you be asking your lenders? All this and more with our good friend and mortgage broker, Mr. Dion Beg, right after this. Here we are, my friends, back with our favorite mortgage broker in all of the land, Mr. Dion Beg. How you doing, my man?
I'm great, Gary. How's things?
Things are good. I know it's raining where you are. It's cloudy where I am, but that doesn't mean that the real estate market is cloudy.
Depending on where you're standing. Yes.
Depending on where you're standing. Yeah. Is the wind coming from the north, south, east, or west? That's right. Here's what we're going to talk about today, my friends. We got a few things that are coming out from the Landlord Tenant Board, which Dion and I were just chatting offline, is a good thing. We'll touch on that, as well as CRA. There's always something with the CRA, but this one is a good thing when it comes to actually working with landlords and lenders and everything like that. And then, Dion, I think it's important that we touch on renewals, because we know there's a lot of renewals coming up over the next 12 months, and you're going to provide us with some insight on perhaps the types of questions that we should be asking, and maybe more importantly, what we can expect, how to set our expectations. So let's dive into landlord stuff. You're a landlord, I'm a landlord. We work with many landlords, and for the last 3-4 years and maybe longer, a lot of landlords have been pulling out their hair. I've lost all my hair because of it, I think.
No, that happened for other reasons.
Oh yeah, fair enough. Okay, good. Here's what we know. In provinces like BC and Ontario, being a landlord has a lot of extra grief, just based on the rulings and some provinces are more pro-tenant, and we would say those two provinces are, wouldn't you say?
Yeah, and I mean, I think both of us have shared war stories about the Landlord Tenant Board and how unfair they have been, how slow they were during COVID. A lot of my clients, unfortunately, ended up taking, anywhere from 9 to 12 months to actually get a proper hearing at the landlord tribunal. And a lot of those tenants get off somewhat scot-free, because it's very hard to actually pursue them for any damages. And then it's like, and I think this is going to lead to what we're talking about. It's very hard to let the world know that this person didn't pay me. And I think if there was some kind of record of the idea that, okay, that this person, there's going to be a record that this person didn't pay their last tenant, their last landlord, that would be really important information for anybody out there. And it helps not just the landlord, but also the good tenants, because they're not competing with the bad tenants who are out there trying to game the system.
Yeah. And by any means, we are not naive to know that there are bad landlords as well. And we understand that, we receive that criticism. But this does allow the cream to rise to the top. And you said this is great for good tenants, great tenants, because they're not having to compete. And there are a couple of websites out there that actually will provide the public. What's the word I'm looking for? The
Public record?
The public record and the findings, which if you go to the Landlord Tenant Board and you file your claim, and that claim is acted upon, that now becomes public record, which means
that's true.
Which means they are taking those court public record documents and making them available to the World Wide Web. So you can actually go in and search a name, if you will, and if that name comes up with a search response, that public record, that person may have been evicted for non-payment, or you can see why. But that database is really, really tiny compared to, what the entire database could be. So here's what we're talking about. Here's what all this is leading up to. There's an article in the CBC that just came out, and the headline is Ontario Eyes Giving Credit Bureaus Access to LTB Orders for Renters with History of Arrears. What does this mean, my friends? This means that for years we've been saying, and as Dion was alluding to, it would be great if we as landlords could submit our findings, if you will, to the credit bureaus to say this tenant has been habitually late on payments or has missed many payments because of whatever reason. Right now, we don't have a mechanism to report that on any credit bureaus, right?
Yeah, exactly. And what this would look like, guys, is like if you were to miss a car payment or multiple credit card payments, you know that that's going to count negatively against you when you try to go and say get another credit facility. So this would be reporting of missed rent payments. I would say, like with anything, a credit card missed payment once in your lifetime or once a couple of years ago, that's not never going to be a big issue. And I would say the same for rent. If rent was slightly late once or twice in a couple of years period, that's not something to worry about. But I think if we can show that there's been consistently late rent and this person didn't make good on that rent, then that's information that would be very useful for landlords that in terms of making a decision as to whether to let this person reside in their property.
Yeah, yeah, and it has that ripple effect too. You said, going to get a new car or a loan for a car and that type of thing. It'll all show up now on one big credit report, right?
Yeah, and look, let me tell you a real life example for me. Just I think within the last year, I had some tenants and they had paid on time, no problem for several years. They had bought their own property, so they were moving out. So good for them. Tenants transitioning into home ownership, but they chose not to pay their last month's rent. And it wasn't a lot of money, but it was still something. It was a basement rental or something in the range of $1,900. And when I spoke to my property manager about this, they said, "Look, we can pursue them." But to do that, there's all these legal costs associated with that. There's a lot of my time involved with that too, which I just didn't have the time to deal with, and we actually just let it go. But I feel like a great sense of regret there, because here's the thing: those people have gone on to buy a property. That's great for them, but they haven't. I said this to my wife when this happened. It's like these people came into my house at nighttime and robbed me of $1,900. That would be reported to the police as theft. But in regards to these guys having just left, no, they just chose not to pay because, and I think this is true, because there was no real consequence that they could see impacting them long term. And they'd done the math and they'd said, okay, the landlord's not going to pursue us on this item, probably. So they did that. Now, if they knew with certainty that missed payment would reflect on their credit bureau, and they're now homeowners who want to go and maybe get other credit facilities and buy cars in the future, that will probably give people like that a moment to take pause and say, you know what, I better actually do the right thing.
That actually is a perfect analogy of why we feel and many other landlords feel this is incredibly important to the success of being a landlord in Ontario. And I'm sure if it happens in Ontario, it may other provinces may look at this as well. That's fabulous. Okay. Let's move on. Talk to us about the CRA and verifying income, and what does that mean? But how does that tie into our world, if you will?
Okay, so unfortunate to say that in our world, sometimes people make fake income documents in order to qualify for a mortgage, fake pay stubs and
I
notice
don't
of
believe it.
assessments and those types of
No, I
things.
don't believe it.
Unfortunately, it happens. So I'm happy to say that for a while now, our industry has been talking to the government about, hey, why don't we get some kind of verification where if a client tells me they make $180,000, that we can contact the CRA and they share with us the info that was shared with them on the T1 General and Notice of Assessment. And there's just one line number on that report called the line 15,000, which basically just only relates to that income number. So a lot of people are talking about invasion of privacy, but really if it's just confirmation of one number, which is all we need, then what's the problem? And so I'm happy to say that it looks like the CRA has actually started to develop, I don't know what they call it, a task force or a research base where they're actually going to start to look at what would be involved in doing this check. And that would mean that a bank or a mortgage brokerage at the click of a button could send a message to the CRA and say, hey, can you confirm the number that you have is this number? And they'll come back and they'll say yes or they'll say no. And that is going to obviously mean that whoever puts documents that are fake forward are going to be denied their mortgage. Which again, going back to what we just discussed regarding like the tenants, now we've got actual real borrowers who saved looked after their credit, have good income, and saved their butts off to get their down payment together. And now they don't have to compete with all these other people who have tried to jump the queue by making these fake documents. And it will probably stabilize, the market. That kind of documentation fraud is also what drives prices up. And if you look at some of the areas that really prices drove up, what you'll find is, unfortunately, a lot of those areas where prices jumped stupidly also were areas where a lot of fraud was prevalent.
Yeah, I think that's a fabulous idea, and I'm relating it to the realtor world, if you will, and it's best practice to go when you're sitting down with a client that wants to purchase a property or they have their own property to sell. We go and pull title, and it's accessing government documents to verify that who the owners are of that particular property. And it's almost a similar practice, right? You're just double checking, just making sure that you are working with the right person that they say that you're working with. This is no different, right?
Yeah, there's no downside. I'm all for it. And if it cleans up bad actors in our industry, then fantastic.
I love it. Let's do it. Let's do it.
Mm.
Okay, renewal time. Renewals are coming fast and furious, especially over the next. Well, we're already in it, and leading into the next 12 months. There's many thousands of Canadian mortgages that are
I
coming
think
up for renewal.
statistically, it's something like this, Gary. Over the next 2 years, about 60% of all Canadian mortgages come up for renewal in the next 2 years, which is significant. It's
Yeah,
above it's quite a bit above average, because on average you'd have about 20% on a 5-year cycle, right? So it's going to be tremendous number coming up, and people listening here, you're probably in that 1 in 6, or sorry, 6 out of 10 of you are in this position right now.
yeah, exactly. So we've got some listeners tuning in. Okay, the government has recently made renewals or provided borrowers with a few more options, and let's talk about that.
Sure.
Let's just dive right into that one. Actually, I know I've got a couple of questions here that I want to ask you, but typically in the past, when I received a renewal letter, it was a lot, we'll call it easier, path of least resistance, just to sign that renewal letter, because I knew if I went to another lender, I have to go through the whole rigmarole, stress
Yes.
test and everything like that.
Yes.
But there's some good news here. Enlighten us, Dion, on what that good news
Right.
is in the stress
Yeah.
test.
And so this particularly relates to people who have reached the maturity on their mortgage. So they basically have to make a decision. They have to either stay with their current lender or move. And so that's what we call maturity. And that maturity, if what you want to do is just find the best rate, you can do what they call a switch. So you are switching from bank one to bank two, because bank two has the better interest rate. So historically, before we had the stress test, if your interest rate where you were currently where you currently bank with is at 5%, and the people across the road were at 4.5%, then you would have to requalify. See, renewing with the first lender, there's no requalifying. Okay, they just like sign the paper, you're done. If you want to go to the next lender, you will have to requalify. So you'd have to prove your income and all those things. But here's the thing: in that scenario, if your household income was exactly the same and credit was the same, that would be actually quite an easy switch, because you're taking this amount of money from property one to property two at a lower rate, and you can easily qualify. So that was how it used to be about 6 years ago. When they introduced the stress test, if you wanted to switch from bank number one to bank number two with a cheaper interest rate, you had to get tested. You'd have to requalify, but not test at 4.5% in this example. It'd be 6.5%. The contract rate plus two. And so, because of that, a lot of people who wanted the cheaper rate were not able to get the cheaper rate. So that's how things have been for the last 5 or 6 years. Just this week, they've actually rolled out, they've been talking about it for a while, but they've started rolling out at banks now, where if a client comes to us, there's a cheaper rate at the bank across the road, we can actually now qualify their application at the contract rate. We do not have to qualify at the rate plus two. What this means is it's a lot easier for people to make that switch at the time of renewal. You can't be asking for lines of credit or extra money on a switch. It'll just be whatever you have moved to the second bank. And yeah, we can see that this is a huge positive, especially with the the wave of renewals that are coming up in the next couple of years.
Okay, I like it. Now, you mentioned a couple of things in there I want to get clarity on in a sense. And you mentioned, excuse me, we're not adding to that mortgage. The amortization is staying the same. Everything's pretty much staying the same except a better rate, hopefully, and that type of thing. Now, flip that. What if I do want to change that amortization or get access to a HELOC or more equity? Can we still do that, or help me out here?
So you can do that, but it changes the nature of what's happening here from a switch to a refinance. So anytime you're playing with any of the terms on the mortgage, including the amount of the loan, the amortization, those types of things, it is now no longer a switch, it's a refinance. When we are refinancing, yes, we will still be exposed to these stress tests. So just be aware of that. And I'll say that, if your circumstances have improved, like let's just say when you got this mortgage 5 years ago, you just started in your career, but now your career has advanced, your income is up. Yes, a lot of people who want those extra features or extra cash out or want to change amortization, they can do that. But yes, they do have to requalify.
Yeah, yeah, and we always say this to our clients. Uh, the time you should be looking to qualify or obtain more equity or access to equity, so a HELOC, is when you don't need it, right?
Yeah,
and
exactly.
and you just provided a perfect example of perhaps getting a secure line of credit in addition to when your employment has changed for the better. Okay, so some simple questions
Sure.
that come up uh, because we're in it every day. We know the answers, but sometimes when you're not in it every day, or you're signing one of these documents every 5 years, you just don't get exposed to it. Who signs the documents when they come
Okay.
back and forth?
So yeah, I mean, if you've got a mortgage and it's going to be renewed, you're generally going to get a letter anywhere from 30 to 60 days before your actual maturity date. It'll have a table on it, and it'll say, "Here are your choices for renewal." And let's just say it's a couple, a husband and a wife. They own the property, and both their names are on the mortgage. Then yes, you would both have to sign that renewal document to accept one of those potential offers. So yeah, anybody who's on the mortgage would need to sign. Yeah.
And then during a renewal process, Dion, when do I need to get a lawyer involved? I know that question does come up quite often.
Yeah. So with renewals, it is a lot simpler than switching or refinancing. The simplicity is on a couple of levels. There's no lawyer involved. Reason being, you're not registering anything new on the title. You are continuing with everything that already exists on title. So no legal costs involved. Secondly, there's no income qualifying. So when it comes to renewals, as long as you've never missed a mortgage payment, that bank is obliged to renew your mortgage. So just be aware that, if and this is probably a simple example that people can relate to. Gary, let's say there's a young couple, they're both working, then they both buy a house and they qualify for that mortgage with two incomes. Then they have a child, and the wife decides to stay at home and for the next 5, 10 years as a housemaker, and so in that scenario, we've lost her income. Let's just say it was $50,000. Now we get to the 5 year mark on the mortgage, and that income doesn't exist. But the gentleman in the scenario here has been working. The mortgage has been paid on time every time. Could you imagine if, at the time of renewal, Canadian banks made us requalify to confirm that this household still made the exact same income as before? The answer would be no, they don't. And what if the consequence was the mortgage was pulled from them and that family was put out on the street? Right? That wouldn't happen. If it did happen, it'd be on the front page of every newspaper in the land. And that doesn't happen because we basically have a right to renew as long as we've never missed a mortgage payment. So for those people who are concerned that their circumstances have changed and their mortgage may not be renewed, what I would say to you is don't be alarmed. As long as you've never missed a mortgage payment, you should be fine.
That's great clarity. Okay, Wrapping up with this, that renewal letter comes in. We now know that we have the opportunity to change the mortgage to a new lender without going through the stress test, providing we're not looking to change the amortization or the amount
Yep.
of. Is there a question or two that I should be asking my current lender about the rate or a better product, if you will?
Yeah. So if your intention is just to, you're saying intention is just to stay with the current lender. Um, yeah. So, I mean, at the end of the day, the question that I always ask is this your best rate? And sometimes it is, and sometimes it isn't. And the other thing is, even if it is their best rate, it's probably wise to double check with a broker to see what is in the market. And and at that point in time, if something that is in the market is in fact better than what has been provided to you, then you might want to start going through that refinance process or switch process by moving to another lender. But again, as much as that renewal offer comes to you maybe 30 days before renewal, you want to start asking these questions, 60 to 90 days before renewal, and opening a conversation with a mortgage broker. Then I can tell you now, Gary, I've spoken with clients. Um, I spoke with clients 2 to 3 months ago where I said, okay, what have you been offered, or what are they saying to you right now? They've got certain offers on the table. And we said, okay, well, let's just wait. Now that I know what we're doing, let's wait until about 30 days beforehand. We collect all documents, we've got their file created, and then we're 30 days out and we say, okay, what's their best rate at your current bank? Okay, we can get you better. We've got all your docs, let's move. And so we are doing that right now with many of our clients. And this is the smart way to approach it, guys. I, I always laugh at people who like drive across town to save 10 cents on gas. And then that might save them literally $11 on their gas bill, right? But they don't spend 30 minutes of paperwork to figure out if they can save $10,000. And so this is, the whole pennies versus dollars thing. Like, this is where the dollars are at. So take the time. Don't be the person who gets surprised. Oh my gosh, my mortgage is up for renewal now. I've totally forgot. You actually want to check your. This is homework for everybody listening. Go check your mortgage statement, find out what your maturity date is, and put a calendar reminder 3 months before that date to call a mortgage broker.
Excellent advice. I like it. Because for some reason, we always think it creeps up on us, but it should never creep up. And I know you shared many stories over even the last couple of months about changing lenders and it's saving your clients thousands of dollars. This is worth that 30 minutes to an hour it's going to take you to have a discovery call with you and your team, and then start gathering all those documents. And this can change your monthly income quite significantly if you make those right phone calls, right?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if I shared this story with you, but I remember writing about it where a client of mine was about to go on vacation. And he said, oh, it's just too hard for me to even think about changing lenders. And I said, well, how much is this vacation going to cost you? And it was something like 5 grand. And I did some quick math in about 30 seconds. And I said, if you do this, we'll probably save you something like 10 grand. So how about we pay for your vacation and pay for the next one? And he said, okay, it's worth doing a little bit of paperwork then, because
I
it made
like
sense for him.
it. There
Right.
you have it, my friends. So do some homework and reach out to Dion's team. Okay, my friend, how do people reach out to you and your team?
Okay, kangamortgage.ca or on Instagram at the Dion Beg.
There you have it. That's the Dion Bag. I'm Gary McGowan. We'll see everybody in the next episode. Goodbye for now.